The human ship rattled hard as the enemy fire tore through its hull. Alarms screamed from every corner and warning lights danced across the control panels. Captain Reed cursed under his breath as he pulled on his harness, smoke burning his lungs. They weren't even at war with the Zyran Empire, so why had they been ambushed in neutral space? He barked orders, telling his crew to abandon ship. The escape pods launched one by one, glowing like falling stars into the dark atmosphere of a strange red planet. Reed stayed behind to buy them time. He grabbed a plasma rifle and ran toward the lower deck, where intruders had already breached. The hull. The blast doors crumpled like paper, and from the smoke walked a figure unlike anything he expected. She was tall, armored, and moved with grace sharper than any blade. Her red hair glowed like fire under the emergency lights, and her eyes deep violet and cat-like locked on him without blinking. She didn't raise her weapon. Instead, she tilted her head, scanning him like prey. Reed lifted his rifle, but before he could fire, her gauntlet lit up. A burst of energy struck him in the chest, and the world went black. When he woke up, his hands were bound behind his back and his surroundings were no longer his ship. The floor was cold metal, the lighting dim and tinted violet. Strange symbols moved across the walls, alien and unreadable. He was inside a Zyran vessel, deep in their territory, and entirely at their mercy. The bounty hunter walked into the cell without speaking. She removed her helmet and dropped it to the floor, revealing a face both terrifying and beautiful. She sat across from him, unafraid, watching him like a creature in a cage. Reed clenched his jaw and stared back, refusing to look away. "What do you want?" He growled, but she only smiled. "I was sent to retrieve you," she finally said, her voice smooth and cold. Alive, nothing more. Reed didn't trust her tone. It wasn't hate, it was curiosity. She wasn't just a bounty hunter. She was studying him. Not like a soldier studies a threat, but like an artist studies a puzzle they want to solve. He asked about his crew. She didn't answer. He asked where they were going. She said nothing. Every hour that passed, she returned to observe him. Number. Torture, no questions, just silence and stares. The strange thing was he started watching her too, how she walked, how she adjusted her armor, how her frown softened when she thought he was asleep. Reed had fought aliens before. Brutal ones. Ruthless ones. But this one, this hunter, was different. She didn't act like a soldier or even a servant of the Empire. Her armor was custom, scarred, and old. Her manner was precise. Her movements were too fluid, almost like she didn't belong to any army. He began to suspect she wasn't under orders at all. One night, the ship jolted hard. Red lights lit up a hallway outside his cell. A distant alarm echoed through the corridor. Moments later, she appeared at the door again, this time with her weapon drawn. "Don't move," she said sharply. "Stay behind me." Without thinking, Reed obeyed. For the first time, she opened the cell not as a captor, but as a protector. They moved together through smoke and sparks as the ship took heavy damage. A rogue asteroid field had hit them without warning. Bulkheads cracked and systems failed. He expected her to run for the bridge, but she stayed with him, shielded him. When a support beam fell from the ceiling, she shoved him out of the way and grunted as it struck her shoulder. They reached a safer part of the ship where auxiliary power still worked. She slumped against a wall, clutching her arm. Reed crouched beside her and took a closer look. Beneath her armor, he could see the bruises forming. He could also see her flinch, not from pain but from the look in his eyes. He wasn't supposed to care, but somehow he did. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. She didn't respond right away. Her lips parted, then closed. She looked away. "It doesn't matter," she whispered. "You're still my bounty." But the words didn't sound sure. They sounded like a lie she was telling herself. He could see it now. The hesitation. The conflict. the crack forming in her cold, perfect exterior. Reed leaned back and stared at the alien lights above them. Somewhere in all this madness, something strange had begun to grow. Not fear, not hate, but a tension between them that no weapon could explain. Whatever war had started between their species, something deeper was beginning between them. Reed had always believed that time in captivity moved slower than time on the battlefield. But aboard the alien ship, days blurred like melting glass. There was no sunrise, no clocks, no clear schedule. Only the same pulsing lights, the soft hum of engines, and her footsteps echoing down the hall as she came to see him again. She no longer locked the cell door when she entered. Sometimes she brought food, sometimes just silence. Once she brought bandages. His arms had bruises from the restraints. She didn't speak when she unwrapped them and carefully wiped the skin. He didn't ask why she cared. He was too busy. Watching her avoid eye contact. The bounty hunter's name was Sayla. He learned that by accident when another alien called her over the comms. She didn't seem to mind that he overheard it. In fact, the next time she entered, she didn't correct him when he said it out loud. Sayla, he repeated slowly, like he was testing the weight of it in his mouth. You speak it well, she said, standing with her arms crossed. Most humans butcher our names, Reed shrugged. Maybe I'm not like most humans. A flicker crossed her face, almost a smile, but too brief to hold. The silence between them had started to feel like something alive, not awkward, but electric, as if 1,000 unsaid things hung in the air. One night, Reed couldn't sleep. The ship's power flickered and the hum changed, deeper and more unstable. He pressed his ear to the wall, recognizing something humans rarely heard, Zyron's stealth drive malfunctioning. Sayla burst into the room moments later. We're dropping out of warp, she said quickly. We've got a problem. Stay close to me again. They rushed to the control deck. Flames danced from shattered panels. A pirate ship had caught their trail. It was Zyron too, but not part of the Empire. Sayla swore in her language and gripped the controls. She barked into the comms, dodging energy blasts with barely a second to spare. Reed stood behind her, watching her work with sharp precision. But then the ship shook violently. Something exploded underneath. Sayla cried out as she was thrown from her seat. Reed didn't think he moved. He caught her before she hit the bulkhead, pulling her close and shielding her with his body. She looked up at him, her pupils wide, her breathing sharp. He didn't let go right away. They landed in a damaged cargo bay, far from the bridge. Emergency lights blinked dimly above them, casting long shadows. Sayla winced as she tried to sit up, her side clearly injured. Reed knelt beside her and examined the burn along her armor. He reached to help, and this time she didn't pull away. She just whispered, "Why do you care?" He could have given 100 answers, but none of them felt true. So he said the one that did, "Because you're not just my captor anymore." Sayla stared at him, as if his words unlocked a door inside her that had been sealed shut. Her breath hitched, and for the first time since they met, she looked unsure of her duty. "I've hunted many," she said. "Rebels, traitors, criminals, never cared, never asked why. But with you I see something I shouldn't." Her voice cracked softly, and Reed felt something shift in the air. He realized then that this was no longer a war between two species. It was something rawer, something dangerously human. Sayla helped him stand as the ship's systems stabilized. They walked through the ruined corridors side by side, not as enemy and prisoner, but something harder to define. She leaned on him slightly, her strength flickering like the damaged lights overhead. He didn't say anything about it. He just stayed close. Later, she brought him to the observation deck. Through the glass, stars shimmered beyond swirling clouds of galactic dust. "This is the edge of my territory," she said quietly. "After this, I return you to the Empire. They will judge you. Maybe worse." Reed didn't flinch. He looked at her with steady eyes. "Is that what you want?" Her lips parted. Her throat moved as she swallowed the answer she couldn't say. She turned away, gripping the railing tight. Her claws scratched faint lines into the metal. "I don't know what I want anymore," she admitted. Her voice was no longer cold. It trembled, like someone who'd never let herself feel anything until now. For the first time, Reed stepped toward her. Close enough to feel her heat. Close enough to make her turn her head slightly toward him, her breath catching. He didn't kiss her. He didn't touch her. But the space between them buzzed like charged air before lightning. There was no need for words. Not yet. They stood together, alien stars watching silently from beyond the glass. Two lives from opposite worlds, tangled in a story that neither of them had planned. Whatever was growing between them, it had passed the line of survival and entered something much deeper. Sayla no longer walked with the same rigid confidence she once had. There was a hesitation in her steps, a pause in her breath every time she approached Reed's quarters. Something had changed in her, and she felt it with every stolen glance. She gave him when she thought he wasn't looking. She told herself this was weakness, that no bounty hunter should grow attached to a target. But every time he stood beside her without fear, or looked at her without hate, she remembered he wasn't just a mission anymore. He was something she didn't have a name for, and that scared her more than any war. Reed sensed the shift too. She had stopped calling him prisoner. She no longer wore her helmet around him. Her voice had softened, and the way she watched him now wasn't cold. It was full of conflict. Reed didn't know what she would choose in the end, but he knew this wasn't just survival anymore. They began talking in quiet moments, sharing stories. Reed spoke of Earth sunsets and the smell of rain. Sayla spoke of battles, of stars she'd seen burn, of how she had been trained from childhood to feel nothing. When she spoke of that life, her voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. One evening, the ship slowed out of warp near a remote Zyran checkpoint. Sayla paced the bridge with unease. She knew the patrol wouldn't recognize Reed as just another prisoner. If they scanned him, they'd find the Imperial bounty mark on his DNA signature. They'd take him, and she'd lose control of the choice. She stared at him across the console. His shirt was torn, chest bruised from the earlier blast, but he stood proud, not as prey but as someone ready to face fate. "You don't have to hand me over," he said calmly. "But you're afraid what it means if you don't." Her jaw clenched, and she didn't answer. The patrol hailed them, and Sayla responded with clipped formality. Her voice was cool, but her hands trembled behind her back. Reed stood silently behind a wall, out of sight. She sent the fake clearance. Codes she'd prepared days ago, ones she swore she would never use. But here she was, sending them anyway. The seconds dragged. Then, the patrol ship drifted away. Clearance accepted. The screen blinked green, and the channel closed. Sayla exhaled slowly, as if she'd been holding her breath since the war began. Reed stepped into the light again, eyes steady. She couldn't meet them this time. "You lied to your people for me," he said, not as a question, but a truth. Sayla turned away, gripping the console tightly. "I didn't do it for you," she muttered. "I did it because I was tired of pretending I didn't feel anything." Her voice was low, but her meaning cut deep. Later that night, Reed sat on the floor of his quarters, unable to sleep. Sayla appeared silently in the doorway. No weapons, no armor, only her presence. She sat beside him without speaking. The silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was something warm, something unspoken, but understood. Reed looked at her gloved hands resting on her knees. "What happens now?" he asked gently. Sayla didn't look at him. "If we run, the Empire will come for me. If I turn you in, I'll never forgive myself." He reached out and lightly touched her wrist, not as a demand, but a gesture of trust. Sayla turned to him then, and for the first time, Her eyes shimmered with something close to fear. Not of death, not of war, but of feeling something she wasn't trained for. She leaned closer, not with force, but with gravity. Like their paths were never meant to be apart. They didn't speak for a long time. Just the distant hum of the ship, the low pulse of systems recovering. The space between them faded until their foreheads touched again, the same way they had in the chaos of the explosion. No kiss, no rush. Just breath shared between enemies who had become something else. Sayla stood first. "We can't stay here," she said quietly. "The Empire will find us soon, but I know where to go, somewhere they won't follow." Reed stood too. "Then take me there. Let's see what happens when two fugitives don't run from each other." She gave him a nod, firm and slow. The decision was made in silence. Not spoken aloud, but sealed in every look, every touch, and every choice they had just made. The bounty was no longer the mission. The mission was no longer survival. Now it was about something far more dangerous to them both. Sayla changed the ship's course without informing command. She entered coordinates deep into the black zones, uncharted systems where no empire dared send patrols. Her hands trembled over the controls, not because of fear, but because she knew what this meant. There was no return from this path. Reed stood silently behind her. He didn't speak, didn't question her choice. He understood it already. He knew what she had risked to keep him free. He watched her shoulders rise and fall with each breath. This wasn't just about betrayal of her mission anymore. This was a rebellion against her own rules. The ship moved through strange space. Nebulas shimmered like frozen storms, and dead planets drifted in the dark. Sayla avoided eye contact but kept checking on him. She brought him supplies, helped him with wounds, but never spoke of what happened between them on the floor of that quiet room. On the third day, a transmission came through the emergency beacon. It was a bounty update. Sayla stared at the screen as the hologram shimmered too. Life. Reed's face was there. So was hers. Now she wasn't just a hunter. She was listed as a traitor. Her reward was double his. She didn't tell Reed right away. She sat on the floor outside his quarters, staring at her gauntlet, watching the data flash and fade. Her name, Sayla of Vorther, now labeled as a defector, a disgrace. She had followed orders her entire life. But one moment of hesitation had rewritten everything. Reed eventually found her there, silent and still. He crouched beside her, his voice low. "They're after you too now, aren't they?" She didn't nod. She didn't deny it either. He gently reached out and took her hand in his bare skin against glove. This time, she didn't pull away. "They'll send more hunters," she finally whispered. "Stronger ones, some of them were trained with me. I know how they think." Reed looked into her eyes. "And do they know how you've changed?" That question made her flinch, because she wasn't sure if she had changed or if she was. Finally being honest, they moved deeper into the black zone, toward an old pirate haven Sayla had once used to refuel years ago. It wasn't safe, but it was hidden. On the way there, they trained together. Sayla showed Reed how to disarm a Zyran pulse trap. Reed taught her how to disable a human drone with just a wire and nail. There was laughter too, real laughter. Not forced. Sayla laughed when Reed mimicked her stiff posture and called it imperial seriousness. He chuckled when she tried human food and nearly choked on the spice. These moments were brief, but they carried more weight than most battles. At night, they sat together on the cargo ramp with the stars behind them. Reed told her stories about Earth, how rain fell on rooftops, how dogs barked at nothing, how people danced just to feel alive. Sayla had no such memories. She had spent her youth learning how to shoot, track, and survive. She turned to him once, her voice soft. "If I had met you before I became this, before I was trained to be a weapon, do you think I could have been like that?" Reed didn't answer right away. He took her hand again, slower this time. I think you already are. You just forgot. The old pirate station came into view, an asteroid base lit by faint beacons, barely holding together. Sayla guided the ship toward a hidden docking hatch. They shut down all external systems and sealed the hull. It was a risky move, but it would buy them time. Inside the station, the air smelled of rust and power cells. Broken machines lined the halls. Sayla led the way with a blaster drawn. Reed followed closely. They reached a locked chamber where she once stored a long-forgotten ship of her own, a stealth-class runner. It was still there. She opened the hatch and stepped inside. Dust floated in the air like memories. She activated the controls and smiled faintly when they powered up. "We'll leave this ship behind," she said. "They'll trace it soon. But this one, they forgot about it years ago." Reed watched her, realizing how much she had prepared for a life she never planned to live. Back aboard the new ship, Sayla pulled up the latest navigation charts. She marked a region known as the Silent Curve, an area full of dead signals and solar debris. "We go there next," she said. "If we survive that, they won't find us again." Reed nodded and tightened the straps on his gear. "Let's see if freedom's worth dying for." Sayla met his eyes again. This time there was no hesitation. No fear. Only the silent fire of someone who had made her choice and would burn the galaxy before taking it back. For the first time, they weren't running. They were moving forward. The new ship glided through fractured space like a ghost. The Silent Curve was exactly what its name promised: silent, cold, and forgotten. Broken satellites, shattered wreckage, and unclaimed drones floated like skeletons around dying stars. Sayla kept one hand on the controls, the other near her blaster. Reed watched the dark clouds of debris swirl past the glass. There were no signals, no warnings, no maps. Only the soft pulse of their hidden systems, and Sayla's sharp breath every time the ship creaked. This place was a graveyard. Perfect for hiding. Perfect for ambushes, too. They avoided power surges and cut engines for hours at a time. Sayla used ancient pirate codes to fool passive scanners. Reed helped reroute backup power manually, his hands smudged with grease, his arms aching but steady. They worked together like a real crew now, not captor and captive, during the fourth sleep cycle. Sayla stood in the observation deck alone. Her red hair shimmered under the dim emergency light. She didn't wear her armor anymore, just a worn dark jacket and utility belt. She stared at the endless dark with eyes full of questions she no longer knew how to ask. Reed found her there and stepped beside her without speaking. For a long moment, they just stood there, no words, no need. He finally broke the silence. "You still thinking about turning back?" Sayla shook her head. "No. I just wonder if we'll ever stop running." He leaned forward, placing his forehead gently against the cold glass. "Maybe running isn't the problem. Maybe we just need to find something worth running toward." She turned to him. And in that quiet second, she looked like someone who had never heard those words before. The moment was interrupted by a flicker in the controls. A red light blinked on Sayla's gauntlet. She tapped it quickly and pulled up the data stream. A tracker pulse had just activated. One of the pirates who used this region must have sold their route. Someone was coming. Sayla raced to the controls and began shutting down external energy signatures. Reed grabbed his tools and began locking the ventilation ports. They had 10 minutes, maybe less. The ship powered down to a whisper as they waited. Hidden in a dead cloud of metallic dust, through the viewport, a dark shape emerged. Sleek, sharp, and twice their size. Sayla's expression hardened. "Zyran Hunter class." Reed looked at her. "Like yours?" She nodded grimly. "Worse. That one's not bounty approved. That's an exterminator ship. It's here to kill us." The enemy vessel began scanning the area, bright beams cutting through the dust. Sayla pulled Reed behind a reinforced console and whispered instructions. They held their breath as the beam passed inches above them. A single signal spike would reveal their location. Suddenly, the ship's backup oxygen vent released a small burst of vapor. Just enough to reflect the scanner. Sayla's eyes widened. They saw it. She grabbed Reed's arm and pulled him toward the escape port. We can't outrun them in this. We hide in the debris. Eva suits only. Reed suited up quickly, his heart pounding. Sayla slid into her zero-gravity harness and handed him a tether line. Stay close to me, she ordered. No lights, no comms. If they shoot, don't run, drift. They slipped through the airlock and into the cold black void. Outside, they floated between broken machines and burned satellite hulls. Sayla wrapped the tether around a twisted piece of scrap and held Reed's hand tightly. The enemy ship scanned again. Now closer. A missile pod opened beneath its hull. Sayla pressed her back to Reed's chest to cover him. A blast echoed through the silence. One of the drifting wrecks exploded. Not their hiding spot, but too close. The shockwave sent them spinning. Sayla reached out and caught the tether just in time. She pulled him close, her breath sharp in the helmet speaker, her heartbeat loud in her chest. Reed steadied her, his hand gripping hers through the gloves. We're not dead yet, he said softly. Sayla turned her head and for the first time smiled under her visor. Then we're doing better than most. They drifted in silence as the hunter ship passed by, missing them by meters. After 2 hours, the enemy left the zone. Sayla and Reed re-entered the ship, freezing, exhausted, but alive. Sayla removed her helmet first, hair damp with sweat. Reed followed, sitting on the floor and breathing hard. Then, without thinking, Sayla dropped to her knees in front of him. I can't keep doing this alone, she said, voice low and full of truth. Every time I think I've lost everything, I look at you and it pulls me back. Reed leaned forward, forehead against hers once more, then stopped pushing me away. I'm already yours. Sayla's breath caught in her throat. She closed her eyes, and for a single moment, all the galaxy's violence faded into nothing. There was only him, and her, and the truth they could no longer hide from. Sayla didn't speak for a long time. She sat beside Reed in silence, her hand still resting over his. Everything in her life had been designed to kill emotion, to erase hesitation, to punish mercy. Yet here she was, trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of what she now wanted to protect. Reed stood up slowly and walked to the navigation screen. They'll be back, he said. That ship was just the scout. The Empire knows where we are now. Sayla joined him, watching the stars rotate on the display. Her lips tightened as she took a deep breath. Then we don't wait for them. They powered up the ship's secondary thrusters and left the wreck field behind. Sayla plotted a course toward an ancient smuggler's route that passed near a neutral planet, the kind of world that didn't report visitors, didn't care about politics, and didn't ask for names. Reed prepped the weapon systems, checking every circuit with quick hands. Sayla moved beside him and adjusted the shield tuning. They didn't speak much as they worked. They didn't need to. Every action was shared, every breath synchronized. They had become something stronger than a team. When the enemy ships came, they came fast. 2 Hunter-class vessels dropped out of warp behind them. Sayla stared at the readings, her jaw clenched. Both armed. Full crew. One is Commander Tyvek, he trained me. Reed didn't flinch. Then he knows how dangerous you are when you have something to fight for. The first enemy shot came from above. The blast shook their hull, but didn't breach it. Sayla twisted the ship downward and opened the rear cannon array. Reed aimed and fired, sending a burst of plasma into the larger ship's engine pod. It struck clean, sending the enemy ship drifting sideways, but the second ship didn't back off. It moved aggressively, like a predator that had tasted blood. Sayla pulled the ship into a tight spiral, dodging blasts by inches. Reed locked in the enemy's heat signature and fired again, but they were smarter. They launched decoys, forcing the shot to miss. The enemy closed in fast. A voice crackled through their cums. "Sayla of Vorther," the cold voice said. "You are ordered to stand down. Return the fugitive. You will be granted mercy." Sayla leaned forward and switched on the response channel. "This human is no longer your concern. He is under my protection." There was a pause on the channel, then a laugh. "You always were soft," the voice said. "Now you've proven it. We're coming aboard. Try not to cry when we take him." Sayla ended the call and turned to Reed. Her eyes burned, not with fear but with something fierce and wild. "We can't outrun them anymore," she said. Reed nodded slowly. "Then we end it here." Sayla stood up, pulled out her sidearm, and locked it into her belt. Reed reached under the floor panel and retrieved the emergency plasma detonator. "We give them a fight they won't forget." As the enemy ship latched onto theirs with docking claws, Sayla and Reed moved into position. They hid behind blast panels and waited. The hatch hissed open. and armored Zyrene stepped through with weapons raised. Sayla didn't wait. She launched forward and fired 2 clean shots into the first soldier's chest. Reed followed, tackling the second. They fought hand-to-hand, using close quarters to their advantage. Sayla took a hit to the shoulder, but kept going. She dropped her blaster and drew her blade, cutting through another soldier with a sharp spin. Reed grabbed the detonator and hurled it into the boarding tunnel. The explosion rocked both ships, tearing apart the tunnel and severing the docking arm. Sayla dragged Reed back into the cockpit as sparks and smoke filled the ship. The enemy vessel spun out of control, flames trailing behind it. One last missile fired, but missed them by a breath. They didn't cheer. They didn't speak. They just sat there, staring ahead, breathing together as the danger slipped away behind them. Sayla reached out and took Reed's hand again, this time without fear or hesitation. "It's over," she said quietly. "For now," he replied. "But I'm not leaving your side again," Sayla nodded slowly. "You were never just a target. Maybe I knew that from the start." She looked at him with eyes no longer hardened by war, but softened by something real. "You changed everything I believed in." Reed smiled faintly. "Then let's build something new together." They set the coordinates for a distant star system, unclaimed and unpatrolled, a place where they could disappear. A place where bounty hunter and prey could become something more. As the ship jumped into warp, Sayla rested her head against his shoulder, her weapon finally set aside. And in that moment, 2 enemies created peace, not for the galaxy, but for themselves.